My favorite videos I get to make on this channel are usually about old cameras that have insane cult followings. Stuff like the original C100, the Sigma FP, and Blackmagic's original pocket cinema camera. Iconic cameras are sometimes hard to spot when they're brand new, kind of like not knowing you're currently living in the good old days of tomorrow, but if I had to cast a vote on any camera on the current market becoming a cult classic, it would be Blackmagic's Cinema Camera 6K full frame. Today we'll take a fresh look at this excellent camera body and I'll explain why this is the camera to watch in the next couple of years. I want to start with physical design. First of all, I think that they should have named this camera the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K full frame, and then the pyxis would be called the Blackmagic Cinema Camera. So that way you're naming the different body styles and names together. Maybe that would have made more sense, but what do I know? I just review cameras on my dining room table. The 6K full frame has the Pocket Cinema Camera chassis that we all know, but only some of us love. I personally don't mind it for a lot of what I do, but every filmmaker's different. If you're using it on sticks, it's great. If you're wanting to shoot vlogs on a cinema camera with Blackmagic RAW and you need a swivel screen, it's not ideal. To some extent, I do wish that the screen flipped up all the way so that I could see myself while shooting talking heads like this, but most of us are using external monitors anyway, so it's not that big of a deal. The screen itself is absolutely lovely. It has a 5-inch diagonal and runs all the way up to 1500 nits. It's also a touchscreen, and since it runs Blackmagic OS, it's an absolute joy to use. It's super intuitive, super responsive, and you've already heard that a million times. In case you've never used a Blackmagic operating system before, we'll just run through it super fast. It's very, very simple. Top right, you have all of your options. There's also a menu button on the right. Top left is all of your overlays. You can swipe up or down to bring in the UI and get rid of the UI. Bottom left, you have your vector scopes, and they will tell you if you're peaking on individual RGB channels. There's a record button. There's a media slot where you can see all your clips, and you can also format, upload to the cloud. You got your audio options. And then once you hit the menu button, this first tab gives you all of your record settings. So you have your codec options, and you have your resolutions, your compression, stuff like that. You can cycle through this menu. You can change from film to extended video or video if you want to. There's off-speed recording. You can change if you want to prefer CF Express to USB-C. We can go over here. There are time-lapse options. There's vertical recording options. You can go to monitor and change individually if you want to control your viewfinder, HDMI or LCD. You have an entire grid of things you want to turn off and on, and then all the menus after that are all fine-tuning adjustments for each of those things. You got your audio settings, and then setup is where you go, and this is just like the camera settings. You can change the frequency of the system running. You want to do something with proxies. If for whatever reason you want to change the shutter speed, you can do that. You can change the mapping of the custom function buttons on top of the camera if you want. These pages are for the zoom and the focus demands that Blackmagic sells if you're in more of a broadcast environment. There's tally light options. There's all kinds of stuff. There's also presets and LUTs. We just went through the entire menu in a minute or two. It's super simple. You can basically figure out how to do almost anything immediately on this camera, even if you don't have experience. As you probably already know, the 6K full frame and the pyxis only record on Blackmagic RAW, and it doesn't seem like Blackmagic's interested in changing this anytime soon. Whether they're opinionated about it being the best format for the camera, or they just want you to use Resolve more, who can say, but it's kind of a non-issue for me since I'll be shooting in Blackmagic RAW 100% of the time anyway. But there are some operators out there who hand off their footage on set to the client, and some clients only accept ProRes. So there is some validity to that concern, and if you need to be able to shoot ProRes, then you'll need to invest in a different camera system. If you can get over the fact that you're only going to be shooting Blackmagic RAW, though, there are some advantages to it. For one, there is a ton of different compression levels to choose from depending on what kind of file sizes you need. So here comes a chart of all the different record times. We'll be talking a lot more about aspect ratios and resolutions when my pyxis comes in, but in short, the advantage of a large format sensor with such a high native resolution is the flexibility it buys you. If you only have Super 35 lenses, fantastic. You have 4perf and DCI modes for Super 35. If you want to shoot anamorphic, great, there's an anamorphic mode. You want to shoot OpenGate 6K, that's also covered. The choice is yours for whatever project you need, which allows for a whole new dimension of creativity. Readout speed changes for each mode also, so here comes another chart. This used to be much more of a concern for me until Diode Films posted that awesome video where he discovered that you can actually fix a lot of rolling shutter artifacts natively in DaVinci Resolve using gyro data. It's not a perfect solution every single time, but it really can save you if you're in a rolling shutter pickle. Just remember to put your focal length into the metadata before you press record. If you're using a native L-mount lens, it will do this automatically. And oh yeah, this camera's L-mount. That means you can adapt almost anything to the 6K full frame, and at this point, the selection of native lenses is pretty nice. Chances are you'll be able to find whatever you need regardless of your lens budget. In case you're curious, all of this footage was shot on my Leica Rs through a $12 cold adapter. We'll pop into DaVinci Resolve really quick. I have a couple shots that I want to run through. First of all, we got a shot of Remy here. We'll take our standard tree and pop it on. I'm going to get rid of my clip so we can have a little bit more screen space here. This was recorded in Gen 5 Blackmagic Film, so we'll take Wide Gamut Gen 5, and then we'll take Blackmagic Film Gen 5. And you can find that down here in the RAW settings. We'll take this at 400 ISO. Right off the bat, the colors are looking really nice. I want to do a little bit of adjustment with curves here. Bring up the ultimate black point, create a little bit more of a subtle transition in the shadows, maybe a bump 75% of the way up. I'll turn on highlight recovery because we are losing a tiny bit of detail on the highlights right here on our waveform, and if you keep your eye right there and I toggle this back and forth, we can get that back. It's probably this spot right here. Yep. We're not losing any information anywhere at this point. What I want to show on this clip, since it is totally handheld, by the way, Blackmagic RAW runs so well on any computer that I've ever put it on. This is a base model 14-inch MacBook Pro with the old M1 Pro, I think, and it runs with the grade on it, no problem. I mean, we don't have noise reduction or grain or anything on this, but it works awesome. So if you go to your tracker stabilizer, and we go over to this little camera icon, and that will give you your stabilization controls, you are going to have the opportunity to use camera gyro data to stabilize, but only if you are using either a native lens that will automatically input into the metadata what your focal length is, or you manually go into the slate settings and change your focal length, and then it can properly stabilize. There was a problem with using gyro data on anything but the 6K mode. So if you're cropping into Super 35, it would do all kinds of weird stuff. And I was doing a bunch of tests with this the other day and couldn't really figure it out. I thought maybe that you would have to do some multiplication with the crop factor, but that wasn't helping either. I did update my camera to the newest firmware and it totally took care of it. So you got to be mindful of that. Make sure your camera is upgraded to the most recent firmware and make sure that you're putting in your focal length always. But anyway, this shot is not super shaky, but there's definitely a little bit of micro jitter. This is a Leica Elmarit R 35mm. So just to take a little bit of the edge off, I'm going to set the strength on the gyro data to 50%. We'll press stabilize. And usually this does not take very long at all. And there we go. Crops in just a little bit, and you can turn on bypass stabilization to see how much it's cropping and what it's exactly doing. And it does an amazing job. It still looks handheld. It doesn't look overstabilized. It's not sticky. The micro jitters are gone. And as a bonus, if you set this to 0% and then you stabilize, it will do no stabilization, but it will get rid of your rolling shutter, or at least a large percentage of your rolling shutter. So I would imagine doing that with most of the shots that I would get out of this camera, because the readout speed isn't exactly super fast in a lot of the modes, especially the 6K modes. So it's kind of a good idea to come in here and stabilize at 0% if you can afford to, if there's not any huge weird camera movements. I'm going to press Option 1 and load this grade into slot 1. We'll move on to the next one, Command 1, which will paste the grade, and I'm actually going to reset our contrast. So here's your boy. Also going to get rid of the gyro data. I'm going to go in and go to 800 ISO to bump this up a little bit. The sun was down whenever I filmed this, so this is literally a low light situation. You can see a lot of noise in my hair here. Also, since I loaded that grade from the previous clip, the white balance is wrong. This was actually recorded at 6700. I'm mainly really impressed at how good the color looks. My skin tone looks like a normal skin tone. It's not falling off into like a weird gray or green or anything like that. It looks like a natural skin tone, but here's my infamous green flannel that is impossible for a lot of sensors to cover and accurately portray, and it's doing an amazing job here. Even the yellows and the reds. My gray shirt is super duper duper close to what this gray shirt actually looks like in real life. And again, it's also doing really well with the skin tone in a less than ideal lighting situation. We're also not losing any detail up here in the highlights. If you look down here in the waveform, we have all of these peaks in here. It's not losing any detail in any of the shadows. It's not losing any detail in the highlights. It's just incredible, the image quality that you get right out of the gate with this. We'll go on to this last shot. I'll load the last grade on there, and this should be at 3200, so that's correct. And I'm gonna bump this up to 3200 ISO. A lot of people complain about the low light capabilities of this camera, which I think is kind of crazy. You can see a lot of noise here, a lot of visible noise. It's a very granular, filmic looking noise that most of the time I'm not even denoising because I love the way that it looks. And if we put on our color space transform here, this is a very textured image. There's a lot of noise happening here. What I would normally do to a shot like this would be to come into contrast, turn on editable splines, raise the black point, and then create a ramp so that the shadows are much smoother. You want to prioritize detail in the shadows and smoothness. And if we turn on our highlight recovery, we're pretty close to not peaking on these lights too, which is crazy. Well, maybe we do have all the information in there. I doubt it, but it's enough to make it look like we have a little bit of roll off here. This is the only illumination in the scene. The sun's completely down and this is at night. I mainly want to focus on the illumination on this tree up here. Wow, that's unbelievable that you can see the inside of the bulb. Anyway, back up to this tree. When we prioritize for smooth shadows, when we pull this down, it's now dark enough that you can see a little bit of texture in here, but I'd be perfectly fine shipping that image. I think you're kind of expecting that in lower light footage. We are used to seeing movies shot on film look a little bit more textured in low light situations. I like this look. If you didn't want to let in any noise and you wanted this to be as clean as possible, I'm going to turn off color space transform and our curves. So here's the original image. I'm going to add a node before the first color space transform with Shift S. And then we can come in here to our denoiser. I'm gonna unhook Luma and Chroma on spatial threshold. I'm gonna turn this up. I'm gonna watch my waveform and you can see it become a little bit thinner as we pull some noise out of it. And then I'm gonna take, maybe we'll do 3 frames on the temporal noise reduction, and then we'll turn that up and do the same thing. As you watch it, you can watch the waveform get a little bit thinner, and then eventually it'll hit a cap where it stops denoising and is just kind of blurring, which we don't want. We want to find that spot where it's not affecting anything anymore. Maybe there, and then we can adjust our chroma on the spatial threshold again. So if we toggle this on and off, we're getting rid of a massive portion of the noise. And then if we turn on everything again, that's a very clean result. I sort of like the texture again of the noise, but if you want it to be clean, you could do a quick denoiser like that. And because the noise pattern is so granular, it is really, really easy to denoise, really, really easy to work with. I mean, yeah, as usual, I'm a very, very big fan of Blackmagic image quality, and this camera and this sensor is among their best, I think. Other cool things include Sony NPF batteries instead of Canon LPE6 batteries, an awesome selection of I/O. There's also an optical low-pass filter that reduces moire and actually does a really, really good job cutting out IR pollution and a bunch of other stuff, but you guys already know all that. What I really want to talk about is the actual value of the 6K full frame going forward. When it was first announced, everybody complained because we all wanted a box chassis, and now we have that. So if you want to use this sensor, you now have 2 different body styles that you can choose from depending on what your needs are. The pyxis is designed like a high-end cinema camera, so it's super modular, and while it has the classic operator side monitor, the 6K full frame has an onboard tilting monitor on the back and an extra XLR. It's also less modular, less expensive, and lighter. There's a lot of hype around the pyxis right now, and I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon. This will probably be a really, really popular and successful platform for Blackmagic. I think a lot of the controversy has to do with the fact that it's brand new, and this happens all the time, and eventually all of the fair-weathered consumers will move on to the next camera system to complain about, and the pyxis will find solid footing in the production world. But that does make me wonder what will happen to the 6K full frame. Either they will coexist beautifully, and the 6K full frame will be a minimal, cheaper counterpart to the pyxis, or to some degree the pyxis might overshadow it. There's a lot of users that bought 6K full frames that are going to want to move to the pyxis, and the good news is that the ecosystem is largely the same. You can still use your L-mount lenses and you can still use your CF Express B cards, but there's also users that bought the 6K full frame that are going to have no reason to switch, and that's totally fine. I think the reason why I'm interested in keeping an eye on the 6K full frame is that the pyxis will have a ripple effect on its price at some point. I guess this is pure speculation, but I wouldn't be surprised if Blackmagic did a price cut on the 6K full frame to further differentiate the 2 lines. Or maybe since it's been on the market for longer, the used prices will start to go down. Or both. I guess my point is there's a lot of filmmakers who are about to be very excited about their new pyxis cinema bodies. I'm one of them, but if the 6K full frame matches your production needs closer, then by all means go and grab one. I love that Blackmagic's giving us 2 different body styles with the same sensor, so you get the same image quality, but you can pick the features that you want in the two different bodies. I'd keep an eye on the used market with the 6K full frame. I fully expect a lot of filmmakers to revisit it in the next couple of years en masse. I think it's a great value proposition right now new, but I also think it'll age like fine wine. Hey, thanks for watching. I'll see you soon.